The Dharma, incomparably profound and exquisite, is rarely met with even in hundreds of thousands of millions of kalpas. We now can see it, hear it, accept and hold it. May we realize the true mind of the Tathagata. Good afternoon. This is day 3 of the 2023 Rohatsu Sesshin at Mountain Gate. And Roshi is unable to join us this afternoon and is fine, but just asked me to talk a little bit about my experiences in practice. And so there are a lot of aspects of practice that are important to talk about. And I certainly experienced one of them today in many different forms. Roshi asked me last night to talk today, and so I did not do Yaza like I had planned to, and yet my subconscious decided I would anyway, because I woke up at 3:30 with a panic feeling about today, and it didn't leave for quite a while. Just this pretty intense fear about this. It was funny because I didn't know what to talk about, and I know I've mentioned this before in previous Dharma talks as well, that I'll have this panic around talking like this. But today it was just really interesting because it was so clear that I felt it felt like I was pinned to a wall. I couldn't move at all. There was almost this tortured feeling of fear, although I'm not even sure that's accurate. That's more what happened later in the day, which I'll get to. But mostly it was just this very, very intense fear this morning, this feeling that I would die, actually. That's what it felt like if I felt it. And so, I've been through this before, as I've mentioned, this particular feeling, and not just related to giving talks, but just in general, it's come up in my practice, this feeling like I would die if I felt this fear. And so I did what I usually do when that comes up, and I just felt it so fully and allowed myself to die if that's what it meant, to open to that fear fully. And I didn't die, not in that way, but things opened up again and I could see more clearly again. So then I thought, well, smooth sailing. Now all I have to do is figure out something to talk about. Well, I thought there would, be no problems today. And then I had a problem. I developed a problem around, I have my 7.5-month-old puppy here working on her Sesshin training. And she started coming up to the table more, which is kind of distracting for people. And so Roshi wanted me to train her not to do that, which, could be a challenging thing. I certainly made it a challenging thing. Didn't need to be. Created lots of ideas around it, lots of feeling of like, well, I know how to do this. I know it takes time, and I can't just, right now train her to do that. But I created a lot of problems around it, and tried to argue my viewpoint with my Zen teacher. And as you can imagine, that went as well as you would imagine it would go. There's no point in arguing with a Zen teacher. Some of us know what that's like. Why is it pointless? Because a Zen teacher's job is to help us see where we're caught, number one. And so any place where we're caught is an opportunity for letting go. And the more we hang on, the more a Zen teacher sees an opportunity for us to experience letting go in that spot, because we all know that the hardest spots are the most fruitful in terms of letting go. And so yeah, there's no winning an argument like that, and yet I tried because I have a habit pattern around that. So at one point she told me I would have been a good lawyer, and I think probably that's true, although I hate paperwork, so I don't know. Maybe not. Anyway, it's this like a habit pattern I have of needing to be right, and some control aspects too, needing to control things, and not always being willing to let go. But she hung in there with me, and I hung in there with her and with the practice, and it was no problem. The next meal, you know what? The dog was fine. She came up a few times to the table, but then she figured out it would be pretty boring if she continued to do that and did other things. So hopefully going forward, that particular issue won't come up again in Sesshin. But my particular issue, my habit pattern, is something I need to keep working on. And so I did today, at first I thought, well, I'm probably not qualified to give any talk this afternoon because of my obvious habit patterns, but I figured I can talk about it. And so it was really, really hard. It was really intensely torturous. It felt like a kind of anger with some fear underlying it, and there was almost this tortured anguish in it. I'm saying this because, when we have these things come up, and at least how I work with it, is I have to just fully become totally aware of everything that's going on within whatever has come up. So, as Roshi says, exquisitely aware of the sensations, the energy around it. And so that was the quality of the energy. And it just felt like this hard granite rock that was somehow also full of lava. That's what it sort of felt like. And I was stuck in it. Like I felt like there was no way out. It was just that forever. Like this big, horrible, torturous wall of suffering. And I would never get out of. Of course, I knew that's not right because I've done that many times in the process of practice. I knew, well, surely I can, there's a way around this, but it didn't feel like that. And that's how I think it can be for all of us. These things come up and it feels impossible to get around. It just feels impossible to get out of, however it feels, whatever way you feel stuck in it. And so I just felt that stuckness. I stayed in that torturous feeling for long enough that I started to get a sense around it, like it actually started to feel like it might have had an end, like an edge to it. And so then I just felt that for a long time with a little bit of hope that I would eventually be able to clear this. And so I just kept exploring where the edges were, kept questioning what the source of it was, what the true essence of it was, and the precise quality. And that's a creative process too, if we try to go at it, or at least if I try to go at it like I'm, processing paperwork, punching holes, just doing something rote, it doesn't work. I have to be creative with how I approach it, never assuming anything. So, I start to feel the edges of whatever it is. Well, I can't assume that's the real edge. I can't assume that anything is real, ultimately. And so as I kept going with that, I did finally feel the wholeness of it, and in that instant, of course, it disappeared, and then there was truly no problem. But I know that this is a habit that will come up, and the more that I open to it each time, then it gets easier and easier and weaker and weaker. In the past when this came up, it could have lasted a very long time. So in the end, if I want to look at it in an optimistic way, I can look back and see that it was much shorter and easier to get through than it was in the past. And part of what helped it release was this sense of opening to it and recognizing that it wasn't real. It's a lot like, if any of you have seen the movie The Labyrinth, which is a very old movie, but I saw it when I was little. And it was powerful to me at the time because at the very end of the movie, there's this girl who's trying to save her baby brother. I think she was babysitting him. And she's basically running from this demon in this dream nightmare world the whole movie. And at the end, what ends it is she suddenly turns around and realizes that she has power and that this demon person that she was sort of running from the whole time didn't. And she turned around and said, "You have no power over me." And that's when she freed herself. And so that particular quote and that particular dynamic has always been inspiring to me, because that's really how it feels like when you have a demon, whatever it is. We all have them. They all have a different shape or seeming power over us. And once we are able to feel the wholeness of it so completely, that at a certain point we realize that it doesn't have any power over us, and then we are free. And in my case, I have to do that over and over again, but it does get easier as I go. And what was disturbing about it to me too is that, when I'm in a mind state where I'm caught, then I can't see things as they really are. That clarity isn't there. And there's a really great novel I've not read because I've heard it's really tragic. I don't want to read it, but the title is All the Light We Cannot See. It's by Anthony Doerr. And that's such a beautiful title. And it really points to an absolute truth that we all have this beautiful light. We all are this beautiful light, but we can't see it, especially when we're caught. Well, we can't see it when we're caught, period. And so when I'm stuck in fear or anxiety, everything goes dark. There's just kind of a sense of reactivity, attachment, need to have things be a certain way. And it just is a path of suffering. And so when I open to whatever has come up, then I am able to eventually see more clearly again. But it's like in Jacques Saran, where she quotes frequently, she's described an experience he had when he was young and he went blind. He would be able to see the things. He would be able to see like a wall down the road or a tree. Even though he was completely blind, he could see these things. But when he was angry or jealous or fearful, he couldn't see anymore and he'd bump into things. It feels like that to me a lot. I can see things when I've let go, and it's a constant process of letting go. It's not a static thing. It's not the one and done. It's an ongoing living experience. And I touched on it a little bit, but I'd like to emphasize that it really does involve dying. There's no way around it. That is what it is. It's because our death is something that our sort of self-identity creates as this monster that's not real. It just feels real. And so we have to go through those real feelings of fear. And nobody wants to do that. It feels horrible unless you have a very strong sense and faith that there's something more beyond that, some incredible freedom and clarity you can open to. It's what helps us all keep going in our practice, I think. But it can be very discouraging at times when it feels so real and you're so stuck in that feeling that you're going to die, that there's no way, to escape it except maybe leaving Sesshin or leaving training or giving up Zen altogether. And people do that. And then, usually, eventually they realize that there's something else that they might want to go back and look at. And then often they can go back and go past that point that scared them so much before and have some significant insight and opening. But it's through that dying that we let go of the mind states that prevent us from seeing the light within. Mitra-roshi said, "To not be attached to anything whatsoever, to not add on to one's direct perceptions, second associations and third associations. Don't hold on to any idea about how hard you are working. That is all extra. To just sit and not be caught on an idea of sitting, an idea of doing it, an idea of doing on anything. That is what makes it so difficult." And that was from a teisho he gave on the Vimalakirti Sutra quite a while ago. But that's something important to mention too. During Sesshin, we can clear out a lot of these habit patterns. And so we can get very, very focused in many ways, and yet still be concerned about, how we're doing, how the practice is going, how close we are to opening, and to let all of that go along with anything else that comes up. As we think about these things, we can have, as he mentioned, second associations and third associations. So thought after thought can just kind of carry us away. And so the more we can open up to the pattern, the habit pattern underneath that, which is usually fear, on some level it's fear, then we're able to become more clear and really open to something different. So Umon, a master who is quoted often because he was so deeply clear, and a lot of what he said was so poetic and profound. It comes through even in the translations into modern English. But he at one point said, and this is a koan that's often used, but he said, everybody has their own light. And when you search for that light, you cannot find it. There's just darkness. And yet, we all have this light. And he asks us all, what is everybody's light? And so I find this very inspiring as we go forward into practice, into Sesshin, deepening every day, having the opportunity to work on habit patterns that obscure that light, and then allowing that light again to be revealed. So I think that's all I have to say for today. Is there anything anybody wants to comment on or ask a question about?
Go first, did you have a picture?
I forgot. Yes, I did have a picture. Okay, so this is how I felt today. This is Nubs the chicken. Wait, I'll show everybody in the Zendo too, just a second. So she is a 1 pound chicken who had like this horrible mite that like ate her feet. And so her owner found that she could put these little shoes on her and then she could find her way around and was able to walk just fine. And I find this little bird so inspiring. This is also a picture.
Oh my gosh.
Just sort of trucking along despite the difficulties. And then winding up an internet superstar. This is from the Washington Post. So anyway, I hope you find Nubs also inspiring. Thanks for reminding me.
Jenny, could you talk a little bit more about the how do you feel the wholeness aspect of it? So like say you're stuck in a real like reactive mind state, for example. You feel like you're on fire,
Yes.
right? So in that state, like how do you find the edges of where you're caught?
Yes. So it takes some time, unfortunately. That is not the answer anyone wants to hear. So the question was, how do you find the edges of the reactive state? Yeah, it is hard to describe aside from just having the faith that you can find the edges of it. So a quote I thought about mentioning today was Eric Fromm said, "Creativity requires the courage to let go of certainties." So I'll read that again because it's really helpful, I think. Creativity requires the courage to let go of certainties. And so when I'm trying to open to this really big reactivity that feels like there's no end to it, I just have the faith that I can, and then I just keep trying. So it's like, it's a lot like being out in the woods and you thought you heard something. You don't know what it was, and so you're just so completely open to any sound, any light, any just inner sense of what might be going on there. And so you just have to be open to not being open to not knowing what it really is, because the reactivity comes out of having an idea of something that's so habituated you're not aware of it anymore. At least I'm talking about myself here. I'm like, so it's like, well, that's reality, that's real, but it's not. It's just such a habit of thought, or of having an idea about something. And so just being very creative without having ideas about, well, I went over here, now I'll go over here, then I'll try under there. I mean, yeah, that can be part of the process too, but ultimately I find that any thinking gets in the way and is extra. And so it's all about sensing, as Roshi keeps talking about. So really getting like a sense of the quality, like I mentioned, there was a sense of this sort of like black granite. Like it was a hard anger for me, a hard anger, and there was this tortured fear beneath it. And I can't think of a better way to describe it. But it's just a matter of just really tuning into it so much that you get this full sense of it. And then you keep going until you do start to see some edges, and it can take some time. I remember taking, weeks or even years ultimately to process fear around certain things. But it doesn't mean you're stuck in fear for years. It just means that it can take a while. You might have to go at it for a while, and it'll go away on its own, and then it'll come back again in maybe a slightly different form. And so you open to it then. So it can be a process as you open to it again and again. But all of us have, I think, all of us human beings have a sort of natural buoyancy. So our psyche will allow us to explore something for a certain period of time, I think, and then it's like, okay, now break time. That's the psychological side of it. In terms of the Zen side of it, really opening to the truth of reality, you don't want to give it a hair's difference. You don't want to give it a hair's amount of space. You want to be completely one with it as much as possible, because it isn't real, ultimately. So you want to, in Sesshin as much as possible, really open to it as much as you can, because now is the opportunity to see beyond it. So I'm kind of trying to give a balanced view. So in the long haul of practice, it'll come up a bunch of times, and you want to be kind to yourself. And without, but it's there's a balance. I think I'm getting myself into trouble here. So from the Sesshin Zen standpoint, don't give it any space. Fully open to it. Like if I had given it any space this morning, I'd still be off, rotating around the earth with anger. But I didn't give it any space. One, because I knew I had to do this today. And I didn't want to suffer anymore. And I didn't want to cause any more suffering either, because I don't think I was very pleasant to be around. And so, what was the question originally?
I think you answered it.
Okay. Yes, what I'm trying to answer right now is the question of, like, there's the psychological processing aspect of it, and then the Sesshin Zen truth aspect of it. And to open to the deepest, truest clarity, we can't give this stuff any space, and we have to really recognize that we can see beyond it. It doesn't have any real power over us. The only power it has over us is what we give it. It just takes some time to open to it fully enough for it to disappear. And then there's this clarity just waiting for us on the other side of it. And then a part of the long maturation is always working on our psychological stuff too. And that can be done really at any point. Usually outside of Sesshin, we want to work on that stuff. Some people work with therapists, some people don't. But the idea is that you do work on these habit patterns over time so that you can really live that truth that you open to, when during Sesshin you didn't give it any space and you fully opened to it. Yeah. Excellent question. Thank you for reminding me about nubs. Any other comments? All right, well, thank you so much for listening and sitting with me and being such great Sangha support. So we'll end this and recite the 4 vows.